hold back. It's time to turn that on. Don't hold back. Don't hold back. I can hear the clicking and clacking on the clock.
Well, here's Zenbock today, and I have a guest that I think I'm going to interview. I'm Zenbock, and you are?
I am Rob Von Bernewitz. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here. I got a long list of things to talk to you about.
Well, I have news for you that you're not aware of. And you know what that news is?
No.
I am going to be interviewing you today.
Okay.
It's like that game show. This is your life.
Okay. Okay.
So, with that said, I'd like to just start from the very beginnings. Where were you brought up, and what was your neighborhood like?
Okay. I was born in Queens, and at the age of several months old, my parents moved to an experimental town. How's that sound?
Were you part of that experiment?
Yes, I was. This is, of course, Levittown, though.
Oh, okay. That's the potato field.
Right, and we moved in with dirt streets. So I'm an early Levittowner, and every other house was a veteran, practically with a new family starting up. So if you fell off a bicycle, somebody would pick you up that you never knew and bring you home. Or if you had company coming to your house and they got lost because everything looks the same from that faraway place in Levittown, that person would ask where you're going, and they would actually get in their car and drive them to your house.
I find Levittown a little confusing. I mean, some of those streets cut in and out, and you wind up back where you started from.
Well, yeah, it's meant to be that way. You know, it's like life. You know, you start off as a little baby, and you don't know stuff, and you need diapers. And when you're an old person, you need diapers, and you don't know where you are anyway.
How old were you when you moved to Levittown?
I was probably about 3 to 4 months old.
Okay. Now, Levittown, being that all the houses look the same, when you went up to the candy store at, let's say, age 8, did you have a hard time finding your way back home?
No, it didn't. It wasn't like that at all. The streets were all curved. We had to walk to school, and we had a long walk to our kindergarten and whatever. And you got to know the streets and the winding of the streets. And although the houses looked the same, there were 3 or 4 styles. The fronts of the houses were different. Some had different cars. And then as you got older, you got to know the cracks in the curbs, and who's got crabgrass and who's got a sodded lawn and who's got a fancier tree. So it didn't look all the same to me. Well, that only happened when you're 18 and you're drunk.
Well, Levittown was the true beginning of suburbia. I mean, there was a lot of people who needed housing, and everybody moved there with the American dream of owning their own home and starting life and raising a new family as the beginning of the baby boom.
And there were 2 Levittowns in Levittown.
What's the difference between the 2 Levittowns?
One Levittown was called Island Trees, and the other one was called Levittown District 26.
That's right.
And Island Trees District 26 was where I would hang out, where the kids were playing music of Eric Burden, and they were playing, and this is back in 1966, 67, and they were playing Butterfield, and in my school it was Jan and Dean.
I see. So they had a little bit of the West Coast on your side. Did you live on the west side of town?
Actually, I lived on the east side of town, near the East Village Green, but the East Village Green was on the Island Tree side. There was Jerusalem, it sounds biblical stuff, Jerusalem Avenue. Further down south we went to Jericho, but that's another thing. Another factor is the musical talent that came out of the area, because we had Bethpage and Plainview and Hicksville and a little further out Oyster Bay, and so we had a lot of musical talent that came up during that period of time from Long Island.
I see. Now, speaking of musical interests, did you hear, what kind of music did you hear in the household where you were at? What kind of music did your parents play?
My first song that I remember was the McGuire Sisters, and the song was "You'll Never Get Away, You'll Never Get Away, You'll Never Get Away No More, No More." And it was a big hit back in 52 or 53.
I see. Now, did you start playing an instrument in your youth? When did
No.
when did you decide? What did you like as a kid? What kind of music?
Well, I liked this early rock and roll. I liked the Louis Armstrong stuff. Definitely had a feel for that.
Heck of a trumpet player.
Yeah, and it was a different culture from I've seen from Levittown. I didn't understand it, but I liked it. And there's a whole different world going on, and I had an interest in it, but I didn't have a way to totally expand it at that time. And then the music for me at one point in my life would have been guitar stuff like The Ventures. And then in my teenage years, I got corrupted.
Well, the Ventures were extremely popular at that time. Everybody wanted to play the guitar because of the Ventures. Would they have the song, the big hit, "Walk Don't Run"?
Right, right. And it was the sound of that guitar. And back then we had hi-fi systems, not stereo. And you could
Like a console, right? Console
Yeah.
sitting in the living room.
Yeah, and thunderous bass and the tanging of the cymbals on the drums, on the cymbals within the kit, and so everybody liked that, and that was my thing. Then I heard a little rockabilly, but I didn't know it was rockabilly.
The blue suede shoes type music.
Yeah. Then I found that some of the stuff was done prior to Elvis, so that got me interested in who did what, you know.
Yeah, I believe the beginnings of rockabilly was like the Texas swing.
Yeah.
You know, where they brought jazz with not rock and roll, but country and jazz mixed together to produce this Texas rockabilly type sound, and it was even shunned and ostracized in Nashville.
You know, it's funny because there were pockets upstate New York that sound was popular.
Yeah.
It was interesting how it spread through the country, but wasn't mainstream. But even country music was like a local thing until it finally became a national scene that had that genre of country music.
Well, you know, it was born and bred in the hills, and with the growth of suburbia, like you say, and the city life, the different styles of music mixed together, and rockabilly was produced.
Yeah.
So you heard some rockabilly, you heard Louis Armstrong. When did you first get a taste of blues?
Well, that's a good story. My brother is 4 years older, and he was in college, and I'm in my 11th year of school, and his friends would be the generation of beatniks that became early hippies, the best way to put it. And
And
They took
what's the
me.
difference between a beatnik and a hippie?
beatniks is like everything is cool, laid back, and it was poetry. And it was the timing was slower.
Like the Kerouac and the Beat Riders and that kind
Yeah. But the hippies, everybody is an effing genius in the hippies. Everybody is an effing genius. See, I'm going to keep that clean. But you know, everybody knew something more than they should, and they were geniuses. You didn't have to prove it. You just had to, hey man, try that. Look at that.
You think
Wow.
the drugs helped?
Well, I won't get too much into the drugs, but there was a large scene of things that you could burn and things that you could swallow and things that came in pill form as well, besides things that were printed on paper.
Well, the 60s were a special time. A lot of stuff going on. A
Yeah.
lot of experiment. Even the government was experimenting with that stuff.
Yeah. This early music scene, though, my brother's friends took me. They said, you like the Ventures, you like listening to guitar. You're going to like guitar. You like heavy bass, you're going to like this. And they took me to something called a blues bag in Howie Solomon's Cafe A Go-Go.
Oh, so in Manhattan.
Yeah.
You hopped on the train?
No, my brother had a 1959, 58 Oldsmobile convertible, and we would put like 9 people, lay about 7 or 8 in the back seat, and he drove into the city, and we got out, and we piled into this little club for $4 or $5 with a $10 minimum, and the $10 minimum would have been one pretzel order for $5 and a soda for $5.
Huh.
And the menu had no alcohol, so being young didn't make a difference.
Oh, really? The Cafe A Go-Go was a non-alcoholic club?
It had things like the luscious soda drink, the LSD, or the ice cream orgy that I shared with a major guy who had a #1 record on Summer in the City. He shared a thing called an orgy with me, which was a kitchen sink of ice cream. And so yes, and the waitresses were all at the time mini-skirted, halter top, because that was the look of the '60s.
Now, was it a large club or a small
No, it was a
club?
little basement, very narrow and long, and you went in, smoke-filled environment, because cigarettes back in the day, and I went in there, and this unknown guy named Richie Havens sang, and I often say it, back then he had no teeth, so you could spray Maggie's for him across the room. Don't sit in the front row. And he had, at the time, a head of hair, an afro.
Right.
You know, now the next time I saw him, he had beautiful teeth. Amazing how that works. And he had very little hair. I don't know if that was by choice or the afro, but
Well, the famous Richie Havens opening up Woodstock.
Well, that was later.
Right.
And then came out next a band called the Blues Project. And, you know, I'm looking for the Ventures. And, you know, there's going to be Thunderous Bass. There was Thunderous Bass. This is around the time, within about 6 or 7 months after they recorded live at the Cafe A Go-Go.
Okay.
So that's the period of time that I seen them.
Did you hear them first before you went there, or was that the
No.
first time you were exposed to this type of music?
No, they knew I was into Ventures. So they told me I was going to love this new music to me. Think of it like I'm going to have Ventures on some kind of super duper coffee high or something.
Right.
They treated me, because I was a kid. These guys were in their 20s and I was 15, 16 or whatever. So when I went in, I really didn't know what I was in for, other than I was going to the big scary city in a basement club, you know, where there's lots of hippies. And I have to tell you, I walked out of that club a hippie.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, the transition was that quick. I mean, the whole scene there, and the amount of the music that you'd see in one night. You know, the Charlie Muscle White, young guy with light brownish hair, and then Paul Butterfield. I was watching this guy, Mike Bloomfield, and in between he played a couple songs with Danny Calm, trading riffs.
Now, that style of music, of blues, was altered. It took traditional blues and they altered it a little and sort of expanded solos, correct?
Yeah, you start off with an artist that later came out, Big Bill Brunsey.
Right.
And he would come out there. And there was another film, I'm going to get his name wrong. You're going to help me with this one. He did this song, San Francisco Bay Blues. Fuller?
Which one?
Fuller, I think it is. Jesse Fuller?
Yeah, Jesse Fuller.
And he had a foot pedal bass, a guitar, and a kazoo. He called it a kazumpet or something. He played like 5 or 6 instruments at one time. He was a band.
A one-man band.
A one-man band. And he had a rambling guitar style while he played.
San Francisco Bay Blues. I got the blues from my baby, left me by the San Francisco Bay. Ocean line ain't you going so far away. Didn't beat the trees so bad. Better carry it. Said goodbye, she'd like to make me cry. I wanna lay down and die. I've got a nigger, he got a loud at night. She don't come back, Lord, I think I'm gonna lose my mind. Never come back to stay. Been another brand new day. Walking with my baby down by the San Francisco Bay.
So this type of blues was contrasted. Back then we had to give everybody a category. At a party, you could spend all night putting a record on and creating a category. And when you went to the record store, they had everything had a category, or it wouldn't be sold. And if you knew the record store owner, and he had a record he didn't know what to put it on, you knew the record, you could tell him what you thought it was. And if he liked your idea, he wrote it on the label.
Well, they had like vocal groups, easy listening, blues, that type of thing?
It went more like folk rock, acid rock, folk blues, Southern blues, English blues, New York City blues, West Coast blues, West Coast rock. You know, the scene from Southern California to Northern California was different, and the East Coast city was different, and Long Island had its own identity coming up in the ranks at the time, too.
And, of course, Chicago.
Well, yeah, absolutely, Chicago, and then we had the Delta blues. Can't talk about
That's where it all began.
the blues. Yeah.
All the Charlie Patton and Mississippi John Hurt. And,
I'm always happy when I sing the blues.
and sing me a little blues right now.
Little blues.
Let's hear a little blues song.
I got me some new shoes. I got me some shoes, and I like to sing them walking blues, walking blues. There you go.
If you walk too long on those shoes, you're going to get some holes in it.
That's it. Then they're holy shoes.
So you came out of the club a hippie.
Yeah.
Did you grow your hair long?
Well, another thing. We walked out of the club, and we had a guy that showed up in the middle of a performance named Ernie. He was one of my brother's friends. Ernie walked around in robes, and he had long brown hair and graying. And he looked like a spiritual figure of Jesus.
He actually went to the club in a
Well,
robe?
yes. We walked out of the club, and some of the Muddy Waters band was hanging on the side, smoking funny cigarettes or whatever.
Right.
And we were walking down the street, and it was foggy rain. This is like 3:34 in the morning. And one of the guys said, "Why don't you guys walk close to the building and you get in the rain?" And Ernie turned around, dressed like Jesus, turned around and he said,
When you walk with me, the rain never touches you.
"This is my early hippie days, you know." So we walked with
That's
Ernie.
pretty deep.
Yeah, we walked with Ernie, you know, and the rain never touched us. Piled into that Oldsmobile, got home at 5 in the morning, and went to school, and the kids, you know, looked at you like, you know, what'd you do last night? Oh, listen to the Blues Project and Siegel Schwall and this and that. A year later, I was talking about a guy named Zappa, and they didn't know what I was talking about.
So let me ask you this. In your first experience there that night, is there anything that really took you and to heart and you remember to this day?
A lot of it, because the music has a beat. It's a syncopated beat of the heart. And it was something that was in me listening to early with the McGuire sisters, That Never Get Away. I couldn't identify it. And I didn't. I was young. But here it was all simplified. And the beat was so strong, it was like somebody bashed you over the head and you enjoyed it. You know, I remember looking at this ice cream in the dish, the $15 orgy thing that they sold with fruit and ice cream. It was big mounded ice cream. And as the music played, this stuff by the beat would go like slish, 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 you know.
It was grooving to the music. It was melting to the music.
Yeah. And then if you were lucky enough to sit next to Al Cooper's Leslie's, and he would do a sweep with his finger on the keyboard and hold a note, I mean, that was heaven. I never heard this stuff before.
Well, it sure sounds like you went into a loaded night and saw some great blues. So you went back to Levittown and you have this experience. Was there any catalyst where you said, maybe I should try this. Maybe I should try and see if I have any of this in me?
Well, at the same time, my brother's friends were talking about making a band. And they didn't have much money, and they were still college students. And I was the kind of guy who saw something on the street. Instead of going to school, I'd put my foot under a giant cabinet and foot by foot walk it home. I didn't care about going to school, but I came in with a giant cabinet or a stereo system. I built a bass amp for the bass player.
Yeah, and
so-
out of wood, I presume.
Well, I built the bass amp out of what was a giant old hi-fi unit.
Oh, okay.
It had a 12-inch electromagnetic speaker in it, tubes, and I built him an amp and set it up so he could plug his bass in it, built him a little preamp, you know, taking stuff that I had and just configuring it. And then
So you like to tinker.
I was the guy. I was always taking electronics. As a little kid, I was fixing TVs. I just always had that ability of electromechanical. So that it was just born that way, you know. So I got that. They started writing music, and they became a band based in Long Beach. And 2-3 days a week they met to practice, plus the weekends with weekend parties, where we'd also drag records to outdo each other with who could find what. And they never got to play in a club. They were living room perfect. And that's a problem that I've seen with some bands, not so much today. But I became one of those. I played in the house alone.
Let me ask you something about the living room scene, though. Did the girls show up?
Well, everybody had girls. One drummer, I think we had him because his girlfriend was that cute. I mean, you saw this one girl, the drummer, with the outfits they wore back then. He was in the band. I'm seriously, you know.
Because of the girlfriend?
Yeah, his name was Bruce. I don't remember the girl's name, but yeah, she was that cute. This was halter tops and mini skirts, you know.
That's usually why guys start playing music.
Well, yeah, these guys came in with the girls. So yeah, the house was full of girls, and I was kind of hooked up at that time. So I ended up marrying my high school girlfriend from the Island Trees side, from the music side.
Oh, I see.
You know, and because I could relate to a band called the How Nows playing early Eric Burden music.
Uh-huh.
You know.
What are some of the other songs that band was playing in the living room?
Well, we did our own music. And we did one song, Come to Get You, Heart of Lead Girl, Caught You Cheating on My Bed, Now You're Dead, Back You Down, Track You Down, I'm Coming to Get You. The band gave me some of those songs that I do now.
Nice.
You know, I can't play it the way they played it. And they spent week after week that on this particular spot, you hang this note and the bass slides to this note and then doubles. And then there's a bridge over here. And when the bridge comes in, the drummer has to do... I mean, it was that kind of tactical.
They were really going to be spot perfect.
They got to the one night that they were going to play in the Cafe Go-Go. Prior to that, we had to bring them, you're going to love this, an acetate. The owner says, before you come in here, bring me an acetate.
Well, that was at the time, the demo tape.
Right. So I had from a Lafayette sale, I bought a Wallensack stereo. I recorded the band, and then I took the recording with the little Wallensack, and we went to the Cafe Go-Go, and we played them, our band, and Howie Solomon said to us, you guys sound just like the Blues Project. You're allowed 2 years too late. See ya.
Well, that stinks.
So we went over to a place called the Bitter End, and the guy that was running it was a heavyset guy. I only knew him as Fat George. But anyway, they gave us a night that we could play. They told us to get there around 8 o'clock.
That's a classic club in the city.
We got to the Bitter End, and they didn't get us on until 3 in the morning. I had to go to school next morning. And these guys are older than me. We had to go to school next morning. When I got home that day, in the morning, and put the TV on around 4:35 in the morning, that was the night that one of the Kennedys got killed. Now, not John.
Right.
The brother.
Robert.
So the night that he got killed was the very night that my band finally had its first bar city audition.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. And the organ player who also was from Queens, who was very close to an Al Cooper type, prior to going on, he turned green and was sick to his stomach outside the club because we were living room perfect.
Had a little bit of stage fright, did he?
Yeah, you know, and I don't ever get it. It's something I never in my life experienced, a stage fright.
No, you always have your calm demeanor about you.
You know, I mean, if you can't own the stage, you know, it comes down to this. This is a very famous thing I tell everybody. If you play any kind of music or art form and you can't please the audience of one, then you're not going to please anybody. So you got to work on the audience of one. Now, you know who the audience of one is?
Yourself?
That's right. And if you can make anywhere you play that room in your head, your setting, your world, and you can master the sound that you play in and bring it to that wherever you're going, whatever tricks you need, if it's an amplifier, it's a little box, a certain guitar, whatever it is, you can bring that sound and make that your living room and get to be you and present it, and you're into you, you got a good chance that they out there will buy it.
You make a very good point there. So, so what happened with that band?
That I ended up moving to Patchogue, UE.
Oh.
I was living at that point in Rockville Center off of Long Beach
Did
Road.
they call that the Sticks back then?
Well, Levittown was the Sticks when my parents moved there. We lived all the way out in Levittown, the Sticks. When I moved out to Patchogue, UE, I was in God's country. You know, I lived by a lake, a massive 23-acre lake. It's really small as far as lakes go. But the point of it, when I moved out here, the kids in Rockville Center were playing Napoleon Solo and I Spy. And when I moved out here, they were in a canoe playing Cowboys and Indians.
Right.
Same, a week apart, in a whole different lifestyle out here.
And how did you adapt to the transition?
It was tough because my music was a progressive blues rock scene, and I moved out here, and it was nothing out here. I moved away from the culture of my friends. I still kept in contact with them, but if I wanted to see them, I had to get in the car and travel an hour. But the music scene in Patchogue did not exist. There was some country music, but not the kind of country music I listened to. And
Like, what kind of country music?
I'm trying to remember.
Traditional stuff from Nashville, like
I had a
Hank Williams? And
No, I had a friend that she did a country band, and I went to see her in a famous bar in Patchogue. I'll mention this. This bar was on Waverly Avenue,
Sorry.
and the second story had horse heads that went up and down at Waverly and Sunrise. There used to be a farmer made a western town as a tourist trap in the 40s. And this at one point became a stripper's place, and then later was a regular country bar.
Okay.
And my first wife, one of many, was working in a bank, and this young girl in the bank was in a country band and was playing this bar. So we went in there to see her in the band. I couldn't relate to the music because I didn't know it. It was local stuff. The look of people here was so different. The interest level, the speech patterns were different. Even when I went out to the Hamptons, they sounded like to me like from sort of a Boston sound. So Long
Well,
Island.
You can argue that the east end of Long Island is part of New England.
Well, yeah. If you can't relate to society there, you could feel that.
Right.
You know, I was very lucky that society liked me. I fit in. Years later, but that's ahead of myself. But you know, yeah, it is a toity-toity society, and you either have to be an artist that somebody can appreciate something of you,
Right.
exploit you, or you have to be well known so they want to buddy up to you, or you have to be a good waiter at work in one of the places to cater to the other people, the service
Got to
industry.
network your way in somehow.
Yeah, there's who would think a guy with pointy ears on a TV station out there would work his way in?
I see you don't have your pointy ears on today.
No, I dropped that transition in 2007. So I had a health event that I decided coming out of a hospital that the makeup and the transition of that had to stop. I started to feel too old. Not that people in the sci-fi community don't do that, even older than I am now, but I felt that I didn't fit the character anymore.
Right.
And I had a lot of pressure from blues people at this point, saying that I would be taken seriously as a blues man locally, not out on the road, but locally, if I didn't walk in with a cape and ears to the local clubs.